I sat in my car in the Whole Foods parking lot for 40 minutes before I could bring myself to read the text again. My older sister, the one I had just wired $32,000 to so she could keep her bakery from closing, had typed out one sentence and hit send like it was nothing. Mom said it's better if you don't come to the engagement dinner Saturday. Just immediate family, you understand. Immediate family. I stared at those two words until they stopped looking like English. Before I tell you exactly what I did to make every single one of them wish they had never sent that message, do me a favor and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I want to know how far this story reaches. My groceries were melting in the back seat. A pint of Haagen-Dazs and a wild salmon fillet I had picked out for dinner because I was supposedly celebrating something. I had just signed the paperwork that morning. 3 months of negotiations, 2 armies of lawyers, and a wire transfer that landed in my LLC's escrow account at 9:47 a.m. I had sold a small piece of code I wrote in graduate school, a routing algorithm for last-mile logistics, to a logistics conglomerate based out of Atlanta. The check, after taxes and legal fees, was going to clear at just over $22 million. And the first thing I did with my new life was send my sister $32,000 because she cried on the phone about her bakery's commercial oven and her overdue lease, and how Mom was going to be so disappointed if the family business went under on her watch. I am 31 years old. My name doesn't matter for the parts of this story that hurt, but you can call me Renata, because that is what my grandmother called me before she died, and she was the only person in that family who ever looked at me like I was a whole person and not a line item in the household budget. I sat in a Whole Foods parking lot watching a woman load her toddler into a minivan, and I felt the strangest sensation, not sadness, not even rage, just a kind of cold, mathematical clarity, like a calculator finally rendering the answer to an equation I had been carrying in my head for 31 years. I was not the daughter. I was the funding round. My older sister was the product. The product had to be presented well, marketed properly, packaged for the right audience. The funding round just needed to keep wiring money and stay out of the photographs. And now the product was getting engaged to a man whose family owned 3 car dealerships across 2 states, and the funding round had been politely informed that her presence would dilute the brand. I want to take you back, just for a minute, to a moment I have not thought about in maybe 20 years. I was 8 years old. It was my sister's 12th birthday party. My mother had hired a pony for the backyard, the kind that comes in a trailer with a sad teenage girl who walks it in a circle while suburban children scream. There were maybe 15 kids there, all of my sister's friends, and I was so excited because I thought, finally, I get to ride a pony too. When I lined up behind a girl in a pink sundress, my mother pulled me aside by the elbow and walked me to the kitchen. "Sweetheart, the pony is from Marissa's friends. You'll get your own pony when it's your birthday." My birthday was in November. The pony lady didn't come in November. I sat at the kitchen window for the next 3 hours and watched my sister wear a little plastic crown and feed sugar cubes to that pony while her friends took turns. Nobody came to get me. Not for cake, not for pictures. When the party ended, I helped my mother carry trash bags out to the curb, and she told me I was such a good helper. That was the rule. Helper. Not guest. I drove home from Whole Foods with my groceries thawing in the back, and I walked into my apartment, a perfectly fine but deeply unremarkable 2-bedroom in a building near the river, and I sat down on my couch and I opened my laptop. The wire confirmation was still on the screen. $22.1 million. I scrolled through my contacts. I did not call my best friend. I did not call my therapist. I called a real estate agent in the Berkshires that I had been quietly emailing for the last 6 months, ever since the deal looked like it might actually go through. Her name was a name I will not share because she was kind to me and I do not want her dragged into anything. I told her I wanted to close on the property we had walked through in October. The 17-acre estate with the main house and the carriage house and the pool that overlooked the valley. The asking price had been $4.8. I offered $4.6 in cash, no contingencies, 30-day close. She called me back 45 minutes later and said it was mine. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and I wrote a list. The list was made up of people my mother had thrown away over the course of my childhood, people who had been disinvited, frozen out, demoted, gossiped about, and finally erased. My grandmother's younger sister, my great-aunt, who had stopped being invited to Thanksgiving in 2009 after she got sober and started telling uncomfortable truths about my grandfather. My father's older brother, my uncle, who had married a woman from the Philippines that my mother had once described in front of me as not really fitting in with our family aesthetic. the neighbors from our old street, a couple my mother had befriended for 2 summers and then dropped after the wife got cancer because, in her words, the energy was just heavy over there. My second cousin, the one who came out at 16 and was politely not invited to my sister's high school graduation party because, as my mother said, we just don't want to make Marissa's friends uncomfortable. I called every single one of them. I told them I had come into some money, which was the understatement of my adult life, and that I was hosting a small gathering at a private estate in the Berkshires the same Saturday as my sister's engagement dinner, and that I was sending a car, and would they please come. Every single person said yes. The great-aunt cried on the phone. The cousin laughed so hard he started coughing. The neighbor with cancer, who was now 5 years in remission, said she had not been invited to a holiday gathering by anyone on her side of the family in over a decade, and would I mind if she brought a tin of her cookies? I told her she could bring whatever she wanted. I told her she was the guest of honor. The week between that phone call and that Saturday felt like one long inhale. I did not tell my mother I had bought a house. I did not tell my sister I had not actually agreed to skip the engagement dinner. I did not respond to her text at all. She read that as me sulking. She told my mother I was being childish about it. My mother sent me a follow-up text on Wednesday that I read 3 times in a row in my closet because I needed to be sitting down. I know you struggle with feeling left out. The Marissa's future in-laws are very particular, and we just want this to go smoothly. We can do something just as girls in January. My treat. We can do something just as girls in January. My treat. I screenshotted it. I sent it to no one. I just kept it. Saturday morning came in like spring, even though it was the second weekend of November. There was a cold snap moving down from Canada, the kind of front that turns the northeast into a gray, wet rag for 3 days. The forecast said freezing rain in our hometown by Saturday evening. The forecast for the Berkshires said sunny, 58 degrees, light wind from the west. I had hired a small catering team out of Lennox. I had hired a photographer, a real one, a woman whose work I had seen in a magazine, because I wanted what happened that day to be documented in a way that nobody could ever reframe. I drove up the day before and slept in the main house alone. I woke up at 6 the next morning and walked the property in my robe with a cup of coffee, watching the mist burn off the field, and I thought about the 8-year-old at the kitchen window. I told her out loud that the pony was hers now. The whole pony. The whole field. The whole house. Guests started arriving at noon. The cars I had hired pulled up the long gravel drive, one by one. My great-aunt got out of the first one and stood there in a navy wool coat I could tell she had bought specifically for that day, and she put her hands over her mouth when she saw the house. My uncle and his wife came in the second car. She was wearing a beautiful dress in a deep red and her hair was pinned up and she looked like a movie star. My second cousin brought his husband, who I had never met, a quiet man with a kind face who shook my hand with both of his and said, "I have heard your name spoken with love in this family for years. It is an honor." I almost cried right there in the foyer. The neighbor with cancer brought her cookies in a vintage tin and her husband carried in a bouquet of late autumn dahlias that he had grown himself. The lunch was set out on a long table on the slate patio overlooking the valley. I had told the caterer I wanted abundance. I wanted a table that made people feel like guests at a wedding, not visitors at a dinner. There was a standing rib roast and roasted root vegetables and a bourbon-glazed ham and 3 kinds of bread from a bakery in Great Barrington and a cheese course that took up a whole second table. There was a bar with a bartender who knew how to make an old-fashioned the right way. I had asked the photographer to be invisible, and she was, until the moment when my great-aunt raised her glass and said something I will not repeat here because it was meant for that table only, and the photographer caught it, and that picture is now framed in my hallway. After lunch, I led everyone down to the field. The string trio played. The sun was so bright off the pond that you had to squint. I stood at the edge of the lawn and I asked the photographer to send me a few quick edits in the next hour, the very best ones, because I had a use for them. She nodded like she understood exactly what I meant. By 3 in the afternoon, I had 6 photographs, 3 group shots, 1 of the table, 1 of my great-aunt and the neighbor laughing with their heads tilted together, and 1 of me, standing on the front steps of the main house, looking like a person who finally had her own pony. I opened Instagram. I had not posted anything in 11 months. My account had 240 followers, mostly people from college I never spoke to, and my mother and my sister and my sister's fiancé, and a handful of cousins on my mother's side who I knew lurked. I uploaded all 6 photographs. I wrote the caption slowly. I deleted it twice. The version I posted said this: "Spent the afternoon with the people who were told they didn't fit the family aesthetic. Turns out the aesthetic looks beautiful here. To everyone who was ever erased from a family photograph, you have a seat at my table for as long as I have one." With love and full hearts from the new place. Hope the rain holds off back home tonight. I tagged everyone in the photos by name, including my great aunt, including the cousin and his husband, including the neighbor. I hit post. I turned my phone face down on the slate patio table and I went back to my guests. I told nobody what I had just done. The first vibration came 8 minutes later. By the time I picked the phone up, an hour after that, there were 63 notifications. I went into the powder room off the kitchen and I sat on the closed toilet lid and I scrolled. The first call was from my mother. The voicemail was 11 seconds long and it was just her saying my name 3 times in 3 different tones. The second voicemail, 6 minutes later, was longer. She had her professional voice on, the one she uses when she is trying to manage something. Honey, I am seeing some posts that I think you may want to take down. Marissa's future mother-in-law follows you somehow. I don't know how, and she is asking some uncomfortable questions, and I think there has been a misunderstanding. I almost laughed out loud in the powder room. The third voicemail was my sister. She was screaming, not crying. Screaming. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? You always do this. You always have to make everything about you. His mother just asked me at dinner why our own family doesn't include us in things. Do you have any idea what you have done? Take it down. Take it down right now or I swear to God. I scrolled past the rest of the voicemails. There were 19 of them. I went back out to the lawn. The string trio was playing something slow. My uncle was dancing with his wife on the grass. My great-aunt was sitting in an Adirondack chair with the neighbor, both of them with throws across their laps, watching the sun move down behind the hills. I sat down next to them and I did not look at my phone again until the guests had all left. By 11 that night, after everyone had been driven back to the inn I had booked them all into for the weekend, the call count was 47 missed and the text count was over 100. I read them all. I made a cup of tea. I sat at the kitchen table in the main house in a property that had been mine for less than 3 weeks, and I read every single message in the order they arrived. The arc was beautiful. It started with confusion. It moved into rage. By message number 30 or so, my mother had started threatening me. She said I had embarrassed the family. She said I had ruined my sister's engagement. She said the future mother-in-law had asked, in front of the whole table, why a daughter would feel the need to host a separate event on the same day as her own sister's engagement dinner, and what kind of family dynamic had led to that. And then the threats escalated into something I did not see coming. The last message in the chain was from my sister, sent at 10:37 p.m. Mom is calling Dad's lawyer in the morning. You used family money to start your career. We have receipts. You owe us. Family money. I read it twice. The only money my parents had ever given me was a $500 check for college graduation that bounced. But the audacity of writing the words family money in a text message after I had just wired her $32,000 from my own account 2 weeks earlier was the kind of thing that made me understand, finally and completely, that there was no version of this where reasonable people sat down and talked it out. I went to bed. I slept 11 hours. I woke up to a security notification on my phone at 2014 in the afternoon on Sunday. Vehicle at the front gate. I padded downstairs in jeans and a sweater and made another cup of coffee and went to the security panel in the mudroom. The camera showed a black SUV idling at the gate. My mother was in the passenger seat. My father was driving. My sister was in the back. They had driven 3.5 hours up from our hometown. They must have left right after church. I pressed the intercom. I kept my voice perfectly level. You are on private property. Please leave. My mother's voice came through the speaker, and it was not her professional voice. It was something I had never heard before, raw and high and almost begging. Honey, please open the gate. We just want to talk. There has been a terrible misunderstanding, and we want to fix this as a family. I told her I would come down to the gate. I would not open it. I put on the coat and walked down the long gravel drive. It was cold up there in the hills, much colder than I had been the day before, and the wind was sharp coming off the field. I could see my breath. I walked slowly. I let them watch me come. When I reached the gate, my mother was pressed up against the iron bars with both hands. My father stood a few feet behind her with his arms crossed, doing the thing he always does, which is letting her be the face of every confrontation, while reserving the right to swoop in at the end and play wise patriarch. My sister stood off to the side, her arms wrapped around herself, and her face was puffy from crying. She would not look at me. Honey, my mother said, her voice trembling now, performance grade. We are so sorry, we were wrong. The thing with the dinner, your sister and I have already talked, and we both feel terrible, and we want you to be a part of everything going forward." I let her finish. I did not interrupt. When she was done, I looked at my father. "Why are you here?" He cleared his throat. "Your mother and I think this is something that needs to be addressed in person, as a family. You drove 3.5 hours because of a brunch photo. We drove 3.5 hours because you were throwing away a family because your feelings got hurt." There it was. I almost smiled. My sister stepped forward then and reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it and held it up to the bars. "Renata, we don't want it to come to this. But Dad's lawyer says you used the family computer and the family internet for your project in college. That makes it a family asset. We just want what's fair." The paper she was holding was a printout of an email from some attorney with a strip mall address. It was barely a paragraph long. It cited no statute. It made no actual legal claim. It was the kind of letter you generate by paying someone $300 to put your bad faith on letterhead. I looked at it for a long time. Then I looked at my sister. Then I looked at my mother. Then I looked at my father. And I said the thing I'd been saving for a moment exactly like this one. 2 months ago, I bought the building your bakery is in. My sister's mouth opened. No sound came out. "I did not tell you because I wanted to see what you would do with the money I sent. The $32,000 was not a loan. It was a test. You used it to put a deposit on a venue for your engagement party, the same engagement party I was disinvited from. I have the receipts. I pulled them yesterday morning." She made a small noise. My mother grabbed the bars. "Honey, that's not what happened. The deposit was, we were going to pay you back. The bakery situation is more complicated." I held up my hand. I did not raise my voice. "I bought the building from your previous landlord on September 18th. I kept the lease in place. I did not change anything. But your lease has a clause that triggers a full audit of business activity if the tenant misrepresents the use of the premises to the property owner. You told me on the phone that the $32,000 was for a commercial oven and an overdue lease payment. The lease payment to me, the property owner, is current because you have not yet missed one. There was no commercial oven purchase. I checked." My father uncrossed his arms. My sister was now crying audibly. I kept going. "I am not going to evict you. I want to be clear about that. Because evicting you would make me the villain in your story, and I am not interested in playing that role anymore. What I am going to do is exercise the audit clause, hire a forensic accountant, and have every dollar that has flowed through your business in the last 3 years documented and submitted to the state. If everything is clean, you will never hear from me again. If it is not clean, that will be between you and the state of Connecticut." My mother was shaking. "You wouldn't." "I already did. The accountant started Friday. There is a thing that happens to people who have spent their entire lives being agreed with. When you finally stop agreeing with them, their faces do not register anger first. They register something closer to vertigo. Like the floor has been pulled out from under them and they cannot remember which way is up. My mother had that look. My father had that look. My sister was sitting on the gravel now, knees drawn up, sobbing. I crouched down on my side of the gate so my face was level with my sister's. "I sent you that money because I wanted to see if you would say thank you. I would have given you 10 times that for free if you had just said thank you and meant it. Instead, you sent me a text 2 hours later telling me I was not welcome at your engagement dinner. I want you to sit with that for a long time, because the rest of your life is going to be quieter than you ever expected and you are going to have a lot of time to think." I stood up. I looked at my father. "If you ever come to this property again without an invitation, I will have you removed by the local sheriff and I will press charges. That is not a threat, that is a courtesy notification." I turned around and I walked back up the gravel drive. I did not look back, not once. The sound of their car pulling away came about 10 minutes later. I made it back inside the house. I sat down on the floor of the front entryway with my back against the door, and only then, alone, in a house that nobody in that family had ever set foot in and never would, did I let myself cry. Not for them. For the 8-year-old at the kitchen window. For the 17-year-old who paid for her own prom dress with money from a summer job and then lent her sister $300 for hers and never got it back. For the 23-year-old who slept on a friend's couch for 4 months after college because her parents needed the spare bedroom for storage. I cried for all of those versions of me, and I told them, one by one, that we did not have to go back, that nobody would ever again seat us at the kitchen island with a ham sandwich while the real party happened in the next room. That the real party was happening here now, in this house, on this hill, and the only people invited were the ones who had ever once treated us like a whole human being. I made dinner for myself that night. The salmon I had bought at Whole Foods 2 weeks earlier had not survived, but I had a steak in the freezer from a butcher in town and a bottle of wine my uncle had brought up the day before as a host gift. I ate at the kitchen counter with the radio on. The wind was rattling the windows. I texted my great aunt and asked if she wanted to come up for Thanksgiving. She wrote back inside a minute. She said she had nowhere else to be and she would love nothing more in the world. The forensic accountant called me on Tuesday. The findings were not surprising, but they were going to be expensive for my sister, and they were going to be the kind of thing that makes a wealthy fiancé's family quietly suggest a long engagement. I did not pursue it any further than the audit. I did not need to. The information itself was enough. I have not spoken to my mother or my father in 14 months as I tell you this story. My sister has reached out twice. The first time, she asked for money. The second time, she asked for forgiveness. I gave her neither. There is a thing that happens in families like mine. The therapists call it the scapegoat dynamic. One child gets cast as the problem so that the rest of the system can pretend it is functional. Everything that goes wrong gets blamed on the scapegoat. Everything that goes right gets credited to everyone else. The scapegoat learns, very young, that her job is to absorb, to hold, to pay. The thing they do not tell you is that when the scapegoat finally walks away, the system collapses, because the scapegoat was the one holding it up. I bought a horse last month, a real one. A gentle bay mare with a white star on her forehead. She lives in a stable 2 miles from the main house and I ride her on Sunday mornings slowly around the lower pasture with a thermos of coffee in my saddlebag. There is no pony lady. There are no other children. The pasture is mine. The horse is mine. The morning is mine. And every time I throw my leg over that saddle, I think of an 8-year-old at a kitchen window and I tell her, again and again, until she finally believes me, that it was never her fault, and the pony was always supposed to be hers. I've thought a lot, in the months since that Sunday at the gate, about why it took me 31 years to do what I did in a single afternoon, and the answer I keep coming back to is this. I was waiting for permission. I was waiting for my mother to look at me one day and say, "You are enough. You have always been enough. We were wrong about you." I was waiting for my sister to call and say thank you and mean it. I was waiting for the family to hand me back the dignity they had been quietly skimming off the top of my life since I was old enough to understand the word leftover. The thing nobody tells you about waiting for permission from people who profit off your silence is that it never comes. They cannot give it to you. The whole arrangement only works if you keep waiting. The first time I sent Marissa money without being asked, I was 22 and waitressing. The last time I sent her money was the morning of the day she texted me to stay home. Every dollar in between was a small bet I was placing, a hope I was buying, that maybe this one would be the one that finally turned the lock. None of them did. The lock was never going to turn because there was no door. There was only a wall I had been knocking on for 3 decades, convinced that if I just knocked politely enough, someone would let me in. What I learned, standing on the gravel drive with the wind cutting through my coat, is that the cause of my pain was not my family. The cause of my pain was the agreement I kept renewing with them every birthday, every Christmas, every wire transfer. They behaved the way they did because I let them. That is a hard sentence to write and a harder one to sit with, but it is the truest one I know. The day I stopped renewing the agreement, the consequences arrived on my parents' driveway in a black SUV 3.5 hours later. That is how cause and effect work in families like mine. The system does not change because you ask it to. The system changes because you walk out of the system. I want to say something to anyone listening who has been the helper, the funder, the one in the kitchen with the ham sandwich. The strength you are looking for is not loud. It does not require you to scream or throw anything or post a single word online. It requires you to do one small mathematical thing. Stop subsidizing the people who treat your presence as optional, quietly, completely, without explanation. Use the years you get back to build something they cannot reach. Buy your own pony. Set your own table. Invite the people who have always seen you. The integrity to walk away when staying would be easier, the wisdom to spend your money on a future instead of a fantasy, and the grit to keep walking even when they show up at the gate begging. Those 3 things are the only inheritance any of us actually need. And the beautiful, almost embarrassing secret is that you've always had them. You were just spending them on the wrong people.